If your company starts scaling and you get more clients in the front door, and now you need more people to talk to these individuals, you need to properly be able to allocate what that's going to cost to interact with these individuals. So as part of your customer acquisition cost, it is essential that you carve out money for yourself, and that money should be the money that you are paying yourself, because as the company is going and growing and you're trying to get more clients, you now have a more accurate number as to what it's going to cost you to obviously grab those clients.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Building a Better CAC by Commexis, a podcast dedicated to connecting the space between your revenue goals and sales and marketing initiatives. I'm Matthew McGrorty, the social media content producer here at Commexis.
I'm Len Ward, the managing partner at Commexis.
Today, we're going to be discussing a key aspect of the customer acquisition cost that often gets overlooked by businesses and business owners: client and customer interaction time. So Len, when you say client and customer interaction time, can you explain exactly what you mean?
Yes. So when we are auditing a client to arrive at what their current return on investment is, one of the most important metrics is their customer acquisition cost. And that's everything that goes into the process of acquiring a client or customer. You know, a lot of times you obviously have your digital marketing spend, you have how much you're paying your salespeople, or how much you have your MarTech, or what's your investment in traditional. But one of the most overlooked things in the customer acquisition cost, and normally it's the number one overlooked thing, is the amount of time you're spending with a prospective client. So let's say that you are not a salesperson, or maybe you don't even have a sales staff. Maybe you're an attorney, or maybe you're a doctor of some sort, and you are having a conversation with an individual who you are trying to bring on board as a client. That time right there is critical. That is time you're taking out of your day. That is billable hours. It's billable time that should be accounted for. So if you are spending, say, 10 hours a week, and you're trying to obtain a client, you need to try to identify some sort of hourly rate in which you would pay yourself, or prorate out your salary, and try to identify yourself as maybe the salesperson and say, okay, I spend this much money on or this is how much money I would pay someone similar to myself to be in a sales situation to try to get this client on board. So that number is really overlooked. And a lot of times clients will say, well, that's just part of doing the business. No, it's critical. And here's why it's critical. You have to understand that. If your company starts scaling and you get more clients in the front door, and now you need more people to talk to these individuals, you need to properly be able to allocate what that's going to cost to interact with these individuals. So as part of your customer acquisition cost, it is essential that you carve out money for yourself, and that money should be the money that you are paying yourself, because as the company is going and growing and you're trying to get more clients, you now have a more accurate number as to what it's going to cost you to obviously grab those clients.
So I saw very, very similar to what you're talking about. I was watching a video where a content creator was talking about how long it took them to do different aspects of whatever content they were creating. I think it was videos. And they said that they basically had an Excel spreadsheet that they tracked every minute basically of what they did, and then they had different color coding aspects. So if it was writing, they color coded it yellow or something like that, to give themselves a true picture of what they were doing and how much time they were spending in each different avenue, so they could plan ahead for the future. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about. You mentioned as you grow, it's important to know just how much time all this takes. And I think, and you can speak to this much better than I can, especially when you're a small business owner or the head of a law firm or something like that, you are probably going to be wearing multiple hats beyond what your main job is, right? And being able to effectively, I guess, color code what time you're spending on each thing and track it will then help you, as you mentioned, in the future, because you might be spending, as you said, 10 hours a day doing some form of sales. Well, once you get more clients, then you need potentially 1, 2, 3 salespeople to then be taking that time for you instead.
Correct. I think, look, there are some caveats. You may have a small business where, there's a lady who's running a catering business and she handles all the calls. Maybe she just has 1 or 2 people prepping the meals, and she's really happy. There's a lot of people who have jobs and companies out there, businesses out there, and they make money, but they're more They're more into peace of mind. They're not necessarily worried about growing the business, and that is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You still need to know your financial metrics to make sure that that peace of mind continues and you don't lose that peace of mind. But 9 out of 10 times, what happens is companies ultimately are looking to scale. They are looking to make money. And the quickest way to find out if you can scale and what that cost is going to be is to truly understand what it cost you to acquire that catering client, what it cost you to acquire that divorce case, or what it cost you to acquire that, whatever, building that you're about to put up, whatever it may be. You really do need to understand all the metrics of your customer acquisition cost. And it is truly one of the most overlooked things is that actual, manpower of somebody jumping on a phone, having a conversation. And even if somebody already has a proposal in their hands, and let's say they're going back and forth with you, or maybe there's a question about your process, or, maybe you did a webinar and then the client is requesting yet another phone call after the webinar, because, maybe there's still a little unsure. That's okay. You can maybe say, okay, if we're kind of like the business we're in, we feel comfortable with the profitability, I'm okay with having that. But the minute you try to scale that business up, and the minute you're trying to say, hey, we want to get 10 more divorce cases, or we want 20 more catering events, then we're kind of, you and I are saying the same thing. Yeah, then you are looking at adding more people. And that's where the mistakes start happening. That's where you start trying to pull money from other parts of your customer acquisition costs, because you now need to hire salespeople, or you need to hire a client coordinator. So what's the very first thing that people do? Well, let's pull from the marketing budget. The same thing that's actually funding or pushing these clients down the funnel. So you'll say, well, let's spend a little bit less on Google because we got to hire Jenny, and Jenny's going to be a client coordinator. You know what? Do we really need YouTube? Or, do we really need to do that billboard, or whatever it may be? So that's normally what happens. And that's normally where mistakes are made. And that's when you don't understand that in sales and marketing. That's historically where, when you go to launch a new effort and you hire a couple new people, that's why you're trying to catch up ground, because you never allocated those numbers out of the gate. So when you are trying to grow, it is exactly what you said. You must document all of your costs and make sure that you have all of those costs allocated for. So as you are growing, you can then say, from an intelligent standpoint, say, I know it's going to cost me XYZ dollars to get to where I need to be, predicated there's a market for my product and that there's a demand. And I know that XYZ is going to be made up of this. And in there is an often overlooked expense. And that is how much it costs me to interact with a client, and how much it's going to cost me to pay 2 or 3 other people to interact with a client. I know it's a little long-winded, but it's definitely a very, very important metric as you are making decisions. Because again, we do see poor decisions made on how to allocate marketing dollars because they're trying to pay salaries. And it's kind of because you've never built your customer acquisition cost the proper way.
So without naming any names, do you have any instances in the past where this might have been an issue with you? Either, more recently, or even, years ago before Commexis was as big as it was, or before Commexis was Commexis?
So not understanding the customer acquisition cost, Matt, that's a really, really good question. I mean, we historically run into that with attorneys. So attorneys will 9 out of 10 times will never track the time that they've interacted with a client. What they will track is they'll track the fee that they charge you to come in and talk for them for an hour, whether it's a business matter, a family law matter, criminal matter. They'll say, okay, well, that was $350 and that's how much my billable rate is, or 500 or 175. We've heard a million different rates, but they don't talk about the rate before that. And, normally what happens with attorneys is that, let's just say their marketing campaign takes off and they have to hire another attorney because they have to try to, they have to go in and they are trying to build their law firm, or they have to hire a paralegal who's going to, or like a case manager, somebody who is like going to kind of pre-qualify the individual to get to that $250 fee. And a lot of times they don't account for that. And the first thing they want to do to hire more people is, well, what can we do? What can we do to, here's the famous line we hear, what can we do to maximize the budget? And that's really not the best way to go about it. But you're asking for a case study or somebody who doesn't do that, Matt, I would literally say that's almost every single company that we've come across. And I think that's why, as Commexis is kind of growing and pivoting and we're moving more and more to an auditing based type company, that's one of those things where we're telling clients, look, you have to pay attention to these numbers now. You have to document these numbers now. I know they're a royal pain in the back, but you have to do it so you know all of your numbers in front of you when you are about to hit that trajectory of growth that you hope to get to at some point. So hopefully to answer your question, it was more of I wish I could point out one case study, but I would say it's almost everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think that answered it. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess outside of, because we talked pretty extensively about tracking your time, making sure that you know just how much time is being spent. Are there any other recommendations that you have for solving this problem of people just not being aware?
I know it's not easy. And I think one of the best ways we tell people to go about it, if you're going to truly track how you're going to do it, is literally put a piece of paper right next to you. Like, just have if you have have like a notebook or have something right with you, or put you can actually do if you have your iPhone, you pull up a note and just kind of say hours with client, even if it's as remedial as that, because it's very difficult to get a client to go in and say, okay, well, or a lawyer or a doctor or a salesperson, and why I spent this much time with this person, and kind of adding into the CRM. I think we've gotten to the point now with people with their CRMs and so forth. It's become overkill. They don't want to do it. And yes, I know that there are certain CRMs out there that will track sales calls, they will track emails, they'll track all that stuff, and that's great. And if you have access to that, that's great, because then it can be portaled in and you can export that data, and that can be part of your customer acquisition calls. But for the people who are not using the CRMs, for the people who just find the CRMs very cumbersome, yes, a simple piece of paper, writing it down, and then handing it off to an assistant on a monthly basis, or potentially just having that for your own quarterly review when you're doing it, just writing down roughly how many minutes or hours you're spending with that client. And then you have that piece of data. Ironically, you can work with our reporting dashboard that will help import this for you. We can actually just email you on a monthly basis, a very quick little box. You can input in your numbers and hit submit. That's it. And then that will be automatically filled in your customer acquisition costs. But I mean it when I say it. It's something that a lot of people don't track. And the most simplest way to do it without getting completely insane with tracking everything in a CRM is just start scratching it down, writing it down. And then when you start, when that gets in a habit, when an individual calls you, and obviously the first thing you ask is, oh, where'd you hear about us? Then just track your time. Just note what time they called, write it down. And when it's done, write down your time. And you're starting to build a log of how much time you're spending with clients and so forth. And it's just, small little trick of the trade. And I know it's kind of a little bit of use the term twice, cumbersome issue to kind of deal with. But again, it's something that an issue, or this is a metric that individuals should be tracking and should be aware of how much time they're spending with prospective clients.
Absolutely. In my notes, I have 2 other suggestions: potentially setting a time limit with prospective clients. Easier said than done, obviously. And then a bit of I don't want to say a sales script, but I think just making sure that you have clear questions of what you are trying to achieve with each call or something like that. Obviously, if you're being called afterwards or out of the blue, much different, much harder to have clear focus when something is unplanned. But if you are going to have a meeting, setting up that quick agenda, making sure everything is lined up and ready to go, definitely can help lower some of that time as well. Well, that's all for today's episode of Building a Better CAC. Check us out on Commexis.com, YouTube, and anywhere you can get your podcasts, and follow us on Twitter @Commexis. Thanks for listening.